Okay, let's take a look at pivot tables within Excel. I've had a number of questions and did a number of examples of pivot tables to some people recently, and I think this video may help them out. So the first thing I want to call out is I'm using Excel 2016. The demonstration that I'm going to do should be almost identical on Excel 2007, 2010, 2013. If you're using Excel 2003, which doesn't have this ribbon bar along the top, the process is slightly different. So in this demonstration we have a table of data. Now in the video description I'll provide a link that you can use to download this table of data if you would like to follow along the video that I've created. Now in this table of data we have car sales, and in our data we can see the ID of the vehicle. So we have a unique row for each vehicle we sold. The manufacturer, model, the price that the vehicle sold for, the location in which it sold for, who the sales agent was, and what the order date was as well. Now we're going to use a pivot table to summarize that data in a number of different ways. So if we would like to see how many BMWs we sold in 2016, then we can very quickly get that data using a pivot table. In this table of data that I've got, we have 150 records of data. Now pivot tables are good when you have a lot of data to summarize. Sometimes if you have hundreds of thousands of records, pivot tables can really save you some time and display data in a meaningful way. So first of all, let's get a pivot table created. So you can see here that my data is in one worksheet, the car sale list. Now the quickest way to insert a pivot table is just to click on the top left hand corner here between the 1 and the A to select the whole sheet. Go to the Insert tab and select Pivot Table. You don't have to change any of these properties here just to insert a pivot table, but in essence what's happening in the top half is we're selecting the range of data that we're going to use in a pivot table. So you can see here that Excel has detected ours is the data between columns A and G. And in the bottom half we're saying where do we want to put the pivot table. Now I'm going to leave it as the default for an existing worksheet, but if you had a worksheet with multiple pivot tables or data, you could drop it in there if you wanted to. So I'm going to say OK and create a new worksheet with a pivot table in there. Now the first thing I want to call out, something that catches people out when they start using pivot tables. The pivot table, the design and controls of it are done using this panel on the right hand side here, the field list. If you click off the pivot table, that disappears. Sometimes that catches people out. To get that back up again, you just click into the pivot table here and the panel will come back up on the right hand side. If you click into the pivot table and it doesn't come back and you don't know what to do, go to the Analyze tab up here, and then there's a button on the Show section. So these are all labelled, these sections. In the Show section we have Field List. You might have to click on that to get it back. So let's get some data from onto our pivot table from our sheet. So if I go to the car sale list, we can see what we have there. Let's say we want to see which manufacturer we sold more car of. Okay, so we could filter and get the data that way, but we're going to use a pivot table. So I'll go back to my pivot table here, and sometimes I like to rename this worksheet to pivot just to separate it from the list. We're going to select manufacturer from the fields here, and I'm going to drop that into rows. Now rows are the ones that go vertically up and down on the left hand side here, and columns are the ones that go horizontally left to right along the top. So I've dropped a manufacturer down into the rows column down here, and then I'm going to take something that's unique to each record, and that's the vehicle ID. And if I take the vehicle ID and drop it into the values section, we can start to get some data already. So we can see very quickly from our data that the Volvo sold more with 41. You can sort the data just the same as you do in any other list. So you can right click and sort, or you can use the sort controls up in the ribbon. So if I go largest to smallest, we can see that the Volvo sold more than any other one, and the Toyota and the Seat sold less models. If we want to break that down a little bit further and say, okay, that's good, but what about the models of each manufacturer? Then we can take the model and drop it underneath the manufacturer on our table here. Just let go. And you can see that Excel automatically breaks down those values for us. So yeah, we sold 41 models of Volvo, but what was the most popular one of those? And we can see that they were all pretty much the same, but yeah, we sold a little bit more in terms of the V40 model of Volvo there. So this is a small example, but picture you had, you know, hundreds of thousands of records, then it's a really good way of getting some good data out there. If I want to reset this back to the way it was, we can either uncheck the boxes here, or we can just drag the values back into the pivot table. And that takes us back to the start. Let's take a look at something else. Let's say we want to see how much money, or how much in terms of order value, did each of our sales agents take. So I'll go back to the pivot table. We'll take a sales agent, which is here, and we'll put that onto the rows column. And Excel is going to display our sales agents. So we have those guys there. So we have, let's see, 6 sales agents. And then if I then go to the price and drop that into the values, what Excel does initially is it doesn't recognize that as a monetary value. It simply detects it as a value. So you can see in the column heading here, it says count of price. Now what that's simply saying is that's a count of orders. So that's a count of prices that each of these people have. But we want to change that. We want to change that to a sum. We want to sum up the orders for each of those people. To do that, there's 2 ways. The easiest way to do it in this demonstration is just to right click on one of the items here and select the value field settings. And you can see here, summarize the value field by, and count as a default, but we're going to change that to sum and say OK. And you can see what Excel has now done is summed up the orders that those people have made into a total. So we can see there that Jennifer actually sold more, 767,000. And you can format that data the same way as you could do any other way. So right click, number format. You can pick the way you want to organize that and say OK. And that the values will display in whichever way you prefer. So that's a good way of handling the values. Let's say we want to split it out again. Let's say we want to see it by a location. So on the left hand side we've got our sales agents. We've got the sum of the price along the top. But let's say we want to know how much they sold in each country, or each location, sorry. So in our table of data, if I go back to the car sale list, you can see that we have a number of locations which are major cities throughout the UK. So if I go back to my pivot table, and I want to display these along here, so horizontally in the rows, the columns, sorry. So I'm going to take the location and drop the location into columns. And you can see the value that Excel starts to add now with the pivot table. We can now specifically see, so Jennifer, who sold the most, is 767,000. Where did she sell the most? Well, she managed to achieve the most by selling 150,000 in Liverpool. Now what Excel allows us to do with the pivot table is drill down into this information, and this is something that I find particularly valuable. So if I want to say, okay, well that 150,000, let's take a look at the detail behind those. If you double click onto those, Excel creates a new worksheet and it pulls that specific data out there. So if I go back to the pivot table, by double clicking on the 150, it's going to pull the orders by Jennifer with the location of Liverpool. And you can see the detail there. And we can see the specific information about the particular vehicle sold and when they were sold. I want to keep this demonstration fairly short, so I'm just going to delete this sheet just now. This does say it's going to delete the sheet, but it won't delete the data from your master sheet. So I'm going to say, okay, delete that just now. So nothing changes in terms of the original data sheet or the pivot table. But what I'm going to do is now apply another filter to this pivot table. I'm going to clean it up first of all, something that you might like to do as well. So you can see that there's no blank records here or here. So I'm going to take those off. So I'm going to click on the column labels first of all, which are our cities. And I'm going to uncheck blank. And then you can see that's taken off the blank records. So that makes it a little bit neater. We're only seeing the meaningful information we're looking for here. And you can see that panel's disappeared off the left hand side, or the right hand side, sorry, because I clicked off the pivot table. So I'll click back onto there. Now what you're seeing here is down the bottom is the subtotal per location, and on the right hand side the total per sales individual. If I want to filter all of this information by a specific date, then I can do that by putting the order date into the filters. So if I take the order date and put it into the filters, you can see that that value comes up at the top, and we can select multiple items there. I'm going to leave the demonstration at this just now. If there are any questions, please comment below in the description or get in touch and I'll help you out. Thanks for watching.